Hey guys, welcome back to another lesson. So in this lesson we are going to talk about something a bit different. Every couple of lessons I'm going to help you guys to connect the dots between the different lessons, because we can get carried away by the lessons and I can take many different lessons that you are going to watch one by one, but it's very important to understand why we study what we study, and where all the different lessons, how do they connect together. It's something that is very easy to miss and forget, and in this lesson and every couple of lessons that I'm going to feel like it's necessary to create one of these lessons, we are just going to discuss how the different lessons are connecting together. So during the first lesson I gave you the very basic terminology of the Central Dogma, but I didn't get to explain what the Central Dogma is. So everything, all the organism, the basic unit of life is the cell. The cell is the surrounding environments that we are going to study all the biochemical processes inside, and in order to do it we needed to understand the basic terminology that we use to define and the properties of the following structure, because we studied about the properties of water and atoms and molecules, but by the end of the day this playlist is talking about cellular biology and molecular biology. So as I said in the beginning of this video, the most basic unit of life is the cell, and everything we are going to study is going to be either outside or inside in relation to the cell, and it's very important to remember. So I explained you guys that every cell has this weird book inside, and the book just contains instructions on how to create proteins, and the proteins define the type of cell we are talking about. So we were talking about the fact that all the cells in our body, for example, contain the same exact book, but each cell takes different chapters or different pages and scan them in order to transcribe them, in order to use them for the specific functions of the specific cell. So we have neuron cells, liver cells, vision cells, every different kind of cells that we are going to study in the future. We have the same DNA, the same instruction book, but we have different transcription of different genes, of different chapters, of different books from this cell. Then we took a step back and I told you guys, okay, now that we understand the environment and what we are going to study on and what we are going to study about, we need to understand the basic chemical unit that basically build everything around you. They build the DNA, they build the RNA, and they build the proteins and the cells and everything that we are going to talk about in the future. So this unit is called an atom. So atoms are the basic units of everything you see around you. And why do we need to know it? Because atoms have specific properties as well. And atoms create molecules, and molecules create cells, and cells create tissues, and tissues will create organs. And you will see that it just builds upon each other slowly and slowly and slowly and slowly. But then we took again a step back, because I'm jumping and I'm facing forward to the future. So we talked about the fact that atoms, they can have different masses and different amount of protons and neutrons and electrons. And the amount of electrons and protons and neutrons define the properties of this specific atom. So we checked the periodic table and we saw that some atoms have 7 electrons in the outermost shell, some have 1, and it's very specific to the specific atom. We also talked about the fact that the amount of protons inside the shell of the atom defines the type of the element we are talking about. So 6 protons, for example, gives us carbon, 8 will give us oxygen, 1 will give us hydrogen, 2 will give us helium. And you can deduct this knowledge, deduct this information from looking on the periodic table, looking at the periodic table. Then we understand that atoms can join and share electrons to become molecules. And when we have molecules, the electrons and the orientation in space, the position of electrons in space, define and give us the properties of this molecule. Then we split it into two facts. We talked about the intramolecular forces, the covalent bonds between the atoms, which defined by the sharing of electrons between the atoms to create a molecule. And we realized that the position of electrons in space, if we have an accumulation of electrons on one side of the molecule, for example, when we see water molecules, which is H2O, when you have more electrons on the more electronegative atom, we will see that there is a polarity to the molecule, which means like it acts such as a magnet. And magnets attract each other, which means that many different molecules that are polar are going to interact and attract each other. Then we understood that water have a very big polarity, and the interaction between different molecules and not inside a molecule, which we said is called intramolecular forces. The intermolecular forces between the molecules in space, between the molecules, is called intermolecular forces, defines the properties of the elements the molecules we are talking about and the surrounding. And then we realized that water has a very unique properties because of the hydrogen bonds they are forming between different molecules of water. We saw that because of the big electronegative difference and the fact that you have hydrogen connected to either oxygen, nitrogen, or fluoride, it creates hydrogen bonds between the different water molecules. And because we have these hydrogen bonds, we have many different properties of the water molecules. And in the next videos, I'm going to explain why do we care about the properties of water when it comes to the cell. Because as I said at the beginning, water is everywhere inside and outside in relation to the cells in our body. It's everywhere in our system, and all of the chemical reactions we are going to talk about in the future are happening inside water. And the properties of water are crucial when it comes to help and to support and to contain the biochemical reactions. And you see water reacting and intervening and being a part of so many chemical reactions inside our body. And this is why we first of all talked about the properties of water. We talked about how molecule become molecule. We talked about ionic compounds. We talked about atoms. And we understood, I gave you the general terminology of what is the cell and how the cell creates proteins and define itself as a specific cell. So this was a general introduction to molecular biology. In the next videos, we are actually going to start talking about specific molecules, fatty acids, amino acids, proteins, carbohydrates. I know it's a lot, don't worry, we are going to break it down one by one. So in the future, we are going to talk about all of these, and then we are going to see how the molecules that are biological molecules are going to build cells. And once we understand how the cell, what is the cell made out of, all the very small units that create the cell, it will give you a way better understanding of the cell once we actually study the cell organelles and the cell parts and the cell functions. Once you understand the units, the structural units, it makes a lot of sense to study the next part. So this is why I'm following from day one, from the first video. We are going to start from the smallest unit, and we are going to slowly build over the time our knowledge when it comes to more structure and more difficult to understand structures, more complicated structures in the future. So atoms, molecules, water, surrounding cells, tissues, organs, and at the end, anatomy and physiology. I hope it made sense. In the next video, we are going to study again. I will see you in the next video.